was accidental. That kind of casual proximity that happens when you've grown comfortable with someone being around. But the truth is, I noticed. I'd been noticing for years. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was familiar, like the pause between breaths, like a song you've heard so many times you stopped really listening. My husband had gone to bed early after taking something for his back, the same way he did most nights now. His presence in the house had become more of a routine than a relationship. My best friend's son, grown now. No longer the lanky teenager who used to leave wet towels on my floor after swim days, had asked to finish the movie before heading out. Of course, I said yes. Why wouldn't I? It felt innocent until it didn't. His hand moved. Slowly, without urgency or drama. It drifted, unsure, down to the space between us. The tips of his fingers grazed the outside of my leg. A feather of contact. I froze. My breath caught, my muscles tightened, but I didn't move. He didn't move his hand either. And somehow, that stillness said more than any apology or excuse ever could. It wasn't a slip anymore. It was a decision. My chest rose sharply with a silent inhale, and suddenly, the room felt denser, like the air itself thickened around us. The television flickered in front of us, casting pale blue across our faces. But the images meant nothing anymore. The narrative on screen vanished behind the one unraveling between us in silence. His pinky finger curled and rested against my thigh with intent. He turned his palm upward. I saw it lying there, open, not asking but waiting. My fingers twitched in my lap. I didn't take his hand. But I didn't get up either. There was tension in the space he occupied. I could feel it in his breath, in the almost imperceptible way he leaned closer. "You okay?" he whispered. His voice was barely more than a breath. I nodded. That was all he needed. His hand settled fully on my leg. Steady, warm, not urgent. Just claiming a space it had long imagined but never crossed. I didn't speak. My breath grew shaky. My eyes stayed on the TV, pretending nothing had changed while everything had. A character on screen laughed, a sound that felt like it came from another world. His thumb stroked the curve of my leg, a motion so small and intimate it broke something inside me. My stomach clenched, my thighs pressed together. My hands clutched the blanket across my lap, not in protest but in restraint. When his hand slid higher, cautious and slow, I let my knees fall slightly apart. I don't know why. Or maybe I do. Loneliness can be a long, quiet ache. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It builds in the unnoticed spaces between conversations and touches and days. I hadn't felt truly wanted in years. Not desired, not seen. My husband had grown distant and distracted. I had stopped asking for affection long before he stopped offering it. And when something stops being offered long enough, you start to believe you don't deserve it anymore. This moment on the couch, this touch that wasn't supposed to happen, was everything I had buried. I told myself silence would keep me safe, that nothing acknowledged could hurt me. But silence had also made me invisible. And now, a single hand on my thigh was unraveling years of self-denial. We didn't kiss. Not then. He didn't look at me. He just kept watching the screen while his fingers traced the heat of my skin like a memory he hadn't let go of. I bit my lip. Every part of my body betrayed me. Every breath, every twitch of muscle leaned into his touch, begged for more. Inside, I screamed at myself to stop it. To stand, to speak. But I stayed. He leaned in, whispering again. "You don't have to say anything. I'll stop if you want." I didn't answer. And when his fingers slipped beneath the hem of my shorts, I still didn't speak, because I didn't want him to stop. Not tonight. Not after all the empty nights that came before. Not after pretending for so long that I didn't need anything more than duty and routine. He touched me like I was someone who mattered. Like he had waited years to be near me, and maybe he had. And the part that terrified me most was the possibility that I had waited too. When I finally turned to him and looked him in the eye, I didn't say a word. I kissed him, slow, trembling, honest. It was the kind of kiss that came from a place deeper than desire. It came from grief, from longing, from the sudden flood of being noticed after years of fading in the background. It came from every time I had stared into a mirror and forgotten who I was beyond the labels of wife, mother, and responsible adult. I didn't sleep that night. Even after he left. Even after I climbed back into bed beside the man who was still, by law and paper, my husband. I lay there staring into the dark, replaying every moment like a film I wasn't ready to end, because everything had changed, and nothing could go back. For years, I told myself I was fine. That familiarity was enough. That comfort didn't need passion. That politeness could replace affection. We didn't fight. We didn't shout. We didn't touch. There were no cracks, just a quiet erosion, the soft decay of something that once held warmth. I used to believe that safety meant quiet, but I learned that silence can be its own kind of pain. That night on the couch didn't come out of nowhere. It came from 1,000 unsaid things, from glances that used to carry meaning and now barely registered. I had stopped asking to be touched a long time ago. He had stopped offering it long before that, and into that void, someone else had walked, not with intention or manipulation, but with presence. He had been around for years, my best friend's boy. He grew up in and out of the house, the kind of familiar presence that never drew attention, until one day, he did. I remember when he came back from college, taller, broader, and quieter. He wasn't a boy anymore, and the way he looked at me, it wasn't casual, it wasn't familial, it was aware. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was projecting loneliness onto someone who just happened to be kind, that the way he asked how I was, or lingered in conversation, or helped bed with the fence when my husband was out of town, was just good manners. But the truth was buried in the way his hand brushed mine, steady and deliberate. In the way he watched me, not like a boy looking at an elder, but like a man seeing someone he wanted to know, and for the first time in years, someone saw me, not as a mother, not as a wife, but as a woman, as someone who still held desire, even if she hadn't touched it in a long, long time. That was the beginning of the unraveling. And the couch was just where the thread finally gave way. The days that followed moved slowly, as though the air itself had thickened around me. Every motion felt heavier, every glance laced with something unspoken. He didn't come by the next day, and part of me was relieved. Another part waited, watched the clock, and listened for footsteps or a knock or the creak of a door. But there was only quiet, the kind that filled a house with questions. I avoided the couch. I found other places to fold laundry, to drink coffee, and to sit and pretend nothing had changed. But it had. Everything had. My husband didn't notice. He never did. He asked about dinner, about the weather, and about the electric bill. He didn't ask about me. The next time I saw him, the boy who wasn't a boy anymore, it was late afternoon. He stopped by with groceries, something he had done many times before. He said his mom had extras and thought we could use some. It was a lie, but a good one. I let him in. He set the bags on the counter and leaned against the sink, arms crossed. Neither of us mentioned that night, but it hovered between us. He reached for a dish towel that had fallen on the floor and brushed my hand in the process. That single, incidental touch sent sparks through my arm. He looked at me, then really looked in. My breath caught. For a second, we stood in a silence that screamed, "Are you okay?" He asked again, the same words from the couch, only now heavier. I nodded. It wasn't true, but it was the only answer I could give. He stepped back, respectful, careful. I hated how much I loved that. Later, that evening, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood alone in the kitchen. The floor was cold. The only light came from the open refrigerator as I stared at a carton of juice I didn't want. Behind me, I heard the faintest sound, bare feet on tile. I didn't turn. I knew it was him. He stopped behind me, not close enough to touch but close enough to feel. The air shifted. The silence wrapped around us like a shroud. I closed the fridge door slowly, still not turning. My reflection in the glass was faint, ghost-like. "I can't stop thinking about it," he said. His voice was low and raw. Neither could I. I turned finally. We stood face to face, inches apart, both pretending to be braver than we felt. He raised a hand, paused, then brushed a strand of hair from my cheek. "It was nothing. It was everything. We shouldn't," I whispered. "I know." And still, we didn't move away. The first kiss had been trembling and desperate. The second was quieter, deeper, and tinged with knowledge. We knew what we were doing now. We also knew we wouldn't stop. The rest of the house slept as we stood, in that kitchen, wrapped in something fragile and forbidden. When he kissed me again, I didn't pull back. When his hands moved to my waist, I leaned in. And when we finally stepped apart, breathless and shaken, I knew this wasn't a mistake I would forget, because it didn't feel like a mistake at all. The following days were a blur of routine, laced with tension. My world didn't fall apart, simply kept moving, as if nothing had happened. And yet, everything inside me was tilted. Each smile I gave at the dinner table, each idle chat in the hallway, each coffee cup passed across the counter, it all carried the weight of that kiss. I began to fear my own reflection, not because of guilt, but because I could see the change, a kind of glow, a flicker of want, of awareness. It wasn't just the memory of his lips or the way his hands fit around my waist. It was the feeling that someone had seen me, touched me, wanted me, not as a duty, not out of habit, but out of choice. We didn't talk about it, not with words. Our conversations were painfully mundane, but there was an undercurrent in everything. When he passed me the salt, when he opened the door and let his hand linger just a moment longer, when our eyes locked for a breath too long, we were walking a tightrope, and I was already leaning toward the fall. One evening, my husband announced he'd be gone overnight, for a conference. I nodded, pretending it meant little, but my heart thudded in my chest. That night, I sat alone on the porch. The wine glass in my hand trembled slightly. The cicadas sang in the distance, the sun dipping low in the sky. Then, the door creaked. I didn't look up. I knew it was him. His footsteps were familiar now, quieter than my husband's, more hesitant. He sat beside me. Not too close, not too far. Just close enough that the air buzzed between us. "You look tired," he said. "I am. Have you been sleeping much lately?" "Not really." "Me neither." We didn't look at each other. We didn't need to. Everything between us was loud, even in silence. I sipped my wine slowly. "Is this what you want?" I asked finally. There was a pause. "I don't know what I want. I just know I want to be where you are." I closed my eyes. It was the wrong answer, but it was honest. That night, we didn't plan anything. He didn't creep into my room. We didn't touch, but we lingered together longer than we should have. We watched a movie we didn't care about, on opposite sides of the couch. We didn't touch, but our legs nearly did, and I felt his presence, as if it were woven into my breath. When he stood to leave, he paused by the door. "I'm trying to do the right thing. So am I. Is this the right thing?" I looked at him, really looked. "No." "Then why does it feel like the only thing that makes sense?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because I felt it too. The night he returned again, the house felt even quieter than usual. The kind of quiet that sinks into your skin and weighs down your bones. I had just finished washing the last dish, my hands still damp, my heart already racing, and I didn't know why, or, rather, I did, but didn't want to admit it. I heard the door close softly, and a moment later, footsteps crossed the hardwood floor. He stood in the kitchen doorway, eyes meeting mine. We didn't smile. We didn't speak. He walked in, took the towel from my hands, and dried them slowly and methodically. Then he held my hand longer than he needed to. There was no movie playing this time, no couch to pretend on. The pretense was gone. He led me by the wrist, gently, toward the guest bedroom, the one he stayed in when he visited. The one I hadn't dared enter since that night. The doorknob turned like a confession. Inside, we didn't fumble. We didn't hesitate. The silence was no longer uncertainty. It was decision. He touched me with reverence, not haste. My shirt slipped over my head, my body bare under his gaze, and for the first time in years, I didn't flinch. I didn't suck in my stomach, or cover my chest. I stood there, seen, known, wanted. And when he stepped forward and placed his lips on my shoulder, I broke. It wasn't lust, it wasn't rebellion. It was relief. A dam opening. 1,000 unspoken needs rushing into a single night. His hands mapped places forgotten. My body answered in ways I hadn't thought it still could. The bed creaked under us, the room holding its breath. I cried, quietly, not out of sadness, but because it had been so long since I felt like someone worth touching. After we lay tangled in sheets that smelled like detergent and dust, I stared at the ceiling, my head on his arm, and whispered, "We can't keep doing this." He turned to me. "I know, but we both knew we would, because the real betrayal wasn't in the act. It was in the way it made everything else feel hollow. My marriage, my routines, the polite, empty life I'd been pretending was enough. This wasn't an affair in the traditional sense. It was a collision of truths we had buried too long." He kissed my forehead. "We need to talk. Tomorrow." He nodded. We didn't speak again. We just lay there, the night pressing against the window pane. The weight of what we'd done, sinking in not with guilt, but with inevitability. The morning after was painfully ordinary. Sunlight filtered through the curtains like it had every other day. The house didn't know it had changed. The floor creaked the same, the coffee brewed the same, and my husband's voice from down the hall carried the same absent-minded cadence. It always did. But inside me, something had shifted so deeply, I wasn't sure I'd ever find level ground again. I avoided mirrors that day. I didn't want to see what was written on my face, the trace of being touched, the echo of being wanted. I moved through the house like a shadow, going through the motions. And when I passed him in the hallway, we didn't speak. We didn't smile, but something passed between us. Not guilt, not regret, just ... recognition. Later when I stood folding towels in the laundry room, I heard him come up behind me. The soft steps. The stillness, my hands paused mid-fold. I didn't turn. We said we'd talk, he said quietly. I know. I set the towel down. Turned around, and there he was, the boy who wasn't a boy. The man who had seen me, touched me, and changed me. He looked like he hadn't slept either. We can't keep doing this, I said. My voice wasn't firm. It was pleading. I don't want to hurt anyone, he said, especially not you. You already have. I whispered. So have I. He stepped forward, then stopped. Do you regret it? My mouth opened, closed. I shook my head. No. That's the problem. The silence after that was too big for the room. It pressed against us like a wall. I don't know how to be around you anymore, he finally said. Then maybe you shouldn't be. He nodded slowly. Maybe I shouldn't. But neither of us moved. Outside, the world looked the same. Inside, everything was unraveling. He left the next morning. No announcement, no bags. Just a long silence before the door clicked shut behind him. I watched from the upstairs window as he walked across the driveway. His shoulders were hunched, his hands buried in his pockets like he was carrying every version of the past week in his spine. And maybe he was. Maybe I was too. The quiet